little over a year ago, the FAA announced their notice of proposed rulemaking for remote ID, and you've probably heard already about some of the ways that that threatened to basically end FPV as we know it. If you think I'm being hyperbolic, I'll put a link in the video description to an interview I did with some folks talking about why that actually wasn't hyperbolic. And when they did that, my guest, Tyler Brennan, owner of RaceDayQuads, said that they were going to sue the FAA to try and stop this from happening. Since then, the actual ruling has come out, not the notice of proposed rulemaking, but the actual, they went back and they made up the rule and they released it. And some of the things that we were worried about changed, but some of the things didn't. And that is why, in fact, Tyler, you and Jonathan Rupprecht, did I say it right, Jonathan?
Yes.
Jonathan Rupprecht, you are the actual lawyer involved. You guys have just filed your case, basically suing the FAA to, well, that's one of the things I want to talk about in this video. So welcome you guys to the show.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
The first thing I want to ask is, when the actual rule came out, I think everybody agrees that it wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be. And some people might have said, no, okay, I can live with this. But you didn't. You said, this is not good enough. We want more. And we're worried about the future. What are you worried about? What are you trying to change about the rule?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we had a similar, when we were faced with total and utter doom, which was the NPRM, and then something comes out that is less than that or better than that,
right?
Everyone's like, yes, awesome, we did it. However, and that was partly my initial reaction as well. But regardless, we've been reviewing, the background on all the different ways that this could have gone for the last year or so. So, Jonathan and his team quickly did a review there of it and said, hey, here are still your legal issues. And oh, by the way, here's what we're kind of trying to discern a little bit from this document. And what we were able to take away from both our review and in talking to some relative insiders and people that we would consider in the know was that this is an easy way to put it would be the tip of the iceberg. This is not the final rule. This is not the end all be all. This is not remote ID. This is just the very beginning. And there's certain opinions about why what came out. Our opinion is that the technology behind remote ID, quite simply, isn't ready yet. And that's why we didn't get the NPRM. It wasn't because they listened to us or they thought more carefully about how it would affect hobbyists or FPV or any of that. It was simply because 1 year is much too short of a timeline for them to get on with these guys, create something that they were able to then go and put into a rule. There's just way too many unknowns. So for that reason, and to fight the actual rule itself, which we can get more into, but I think the justification that is easiest to understand is that if there is ever a time to fight remote ID and the whole concept that was in the NPRM, that time is right now because of certain ways of how our government makes and enacts rules. You have 60 days up front, and if the NPRM, what was originally proposed, later comes out 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, and we start raising alarm, like, oh well, it's a FAA doesn't own the airspace. It's a privacy issue. It's too much of a burden. Yada yada yada. They're going to be like, well, hold on. You guys have been attaching beacons and broadcasting and telling everyone where you are, and you already spent X number of dollars. Of course, you could just spend X more dollars. And so then it becomes a lot more difficult for us to go back and argue NPRM. So that's the real easy way to put it. Besides the fact that there are still numerous, which I'm sure Jonathan will love to get into, legal issues and precedents which would not allow what's currently in there to continue. So for that reason,
You said that one of the things they asked for wasn't technologically possible. And this is a point that was raised when the NPRM came out, that they said, here is what will happen. And people were like, well, who's going to do that? And they were like, private industry. But it turned out that, like, I think that one of the things you're talking about is the cloud notification service where it's in real-time contact with the database the whole time it's flying. And that was one of the things that was most strongly objected to. And they backed off of that. And you're saying that you don't think that was because they like heard our voice, but just because they realized it just couldn't be done in the time frame. And so they were like, well, I guess we'll just back away. But you think they still want to do that stuff at some point in the future, and you're trying to get out ahead of that.
Without burning bridges or throwing people under the bus, I would say there is a 100% chance that is still what is going to come and what they are still working on. It just isn't ready yet.
Okay. So anybody in the FPV community, what I said when the rule came out was, if you tell me you're going to cut off 9 of my fingers, and then you say, you know what, I'm only going to cut off 1 finger, I'm not happy about it, but I am relieved. And that was the feeling I had when the NPRM, when the ruling came out. It still wasn't good, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been. But you're saying that they're coming back for the rest of our fingers, is what you're saying. That is our metaphorically
understanding. That is the information that we have. That's what it would lead us to suggest. Yeah.
So Jonathan, when I interviewed you guys a few months ago, when you said you were still going forward with the lawsuit, because a lot of people asked, are you still going to sue now that you see what the rule contains? Many of the things that you were going to sue over maybe weren't in there. And you said, yes, we're still going to sue, but we can't talk about our legal strategy until the suit is filed. You didn't want to show your hand. Now the suit is filed. Can you talk about, what is your argument, the legal basis, whatever arguments you make?
Yeah, great question. So when we originally were on a while back, I mean, it's not just me that's also doing it. We also have 2 other attorneys, so as to ensure, the highest rate of success, right? So, so that way we, have 3 attorneys bouncing ideas off of each other to make sure we really can blow up the Death Star, right? Because they attack with multiple X-Wings, not just one, right? So we're really trying to get that exhaust port. And regarding the legal issues, right, we've identified multiple exhaust ports on that Death Star. Now, regarding tipping your hand as to kind of which of those arguments we are going to use, we're still holding back primarily because the petition for review has been filed. The actual exact legal arguments has not been fully. We haven't fully come out with playing our hand yet on that. I mean, primarily you can look at it from. If you do decent enough research, you can pretty much figure out most of the big major issues we're going to be hitting. One of them is going to primarily be like the Fourth Amendment. There's a very, very large Fourth Amendment issue here going on where the FAA completely wants to almost not even want to talk about the word like tracking, where you see that the Aviation Rulemaking Committee, the ARC, that was put together, it was the remote ID and tracking ARC. But then when you actually get to the final rule here, the word like tracking is not really even much used, right? There's very little discussion on Constitution or Fourth Amendment. So it's actually really interesting is that you can almost look at the what we're going to argue as being what's not actually in the final rule, because the FAA put the easiest arguments for them to defend actually primarily in the rule, hoping that somebody wasn't going to be able to spend enough time to fully, kind of research this out. But Tyler thankfully actually reached out to us a while back. And so we were able to actually spend enough time to start looking for all the needles that were not in the haystack, if you will. Then we're like, wait, there should have been a needle there. Okay, there's a needle right there that the FAA was talking about. Yeah, they mentioned that needle over there. Yeah, that's because that's their best argument or one of their best arguments. And that'd be a really poor argument for us to attack. But yeah, we have multiple arguments that we've put together and researched and very heavily documented over the last months. And so
the rule as released today doesn't require the central database of information that could be queried by law enforcement. It only requires that the aircraft have a kind of a beacon on it. And that beacon is only broadcasting during the time of flight and is only accessible to people in the vicinity. Basically, it's like a Wi-Fi broadcast. So it might have a range of a few 100 meters, perhaps. I think you're concerned about the database of stuff, but is that a prong of attack if they aren't? Can't they just say, well, we're not doing that? And you could say, well, but we're going to, and they're going to say, prove it.
Oh, okay. In regards to, there's a couple different points that you're kind of bringing up, right? So the network aspect of it all was very similar to like you're going over to like cell phone records, and courts have done that, but they backed away from that. And I think also that was one of the reasons that they backed away from network, is they realized there was a whole bunch of issues there potentially with persistently tracking everybody with through the flight information management system. And maybe if we kind of peel it back and do like this lesser form where we put these limited range GPS tracking beacons on everybody, whether or not that would be able to, I guess it would have a better chance of surviving a Fourth Amendment challenge rather than a straight up network challenge. So that's maybe one of the reasons that they peeled it back.
That's one of the things I was wondering, if you think there's still a Fourth Amendment argument if they've removed the network requirement.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a GPS tracking beacon that can still transmit information,
Gotcha.
as well as you can have people persistently. I mean, there are a bunch of 2.4 receivers all over the place at high altitudes, and you can start now persistently logging all sorts of people in an area, and I can start figuring out you and what's going on. And look at FlightAware and stuff, where in the aggregate, where you have a bunch of ADSB receivers, overall creating this overall, they're painting the picture of what's going on in the national airspace. You could do something similar with, think of what they're doing with Wi-Fi SSIDs right now. And you could do something similar where you could just drive around, you could put these remote sensors, and now you figure that out. All of a sudden, law enforcement's kind of doing the equivalent of installing that around the city or town, kind of like the cameras, right? Next thing you know, all the flights are, and this is happening done quietly. And so I would argue still there is a very good Fourth Amendment, even though there is not a network component to it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, there's also a point of just like analogies, right? We use the cell phone analogy and some of these other ones, but the issue is kind of where the FAA keeps going back also to, and they're using this improperly. They keep using the analogy of remote ID is a drone license plate, which it's not, because if it is, then what is the markings on the side of the drone? Those are that's the analogy right there. Actually what this is the GPS tracking device that allows for people to remotely track the aircraft as well as the person on the ground over time. And so there's a reasonable expectation of privacy that an individual has to do this.
Let's talk about the national airspace, because under the current rule, anytime you are flying even an inch above the grass, they consider you to be under their rules.
Correct.
Class G, anything.
So then that's so there's navigable airspace, and then there's what's called the airspace of the United States. In remote ID, they ask for not this, they ask for national airspace. So it's basically airspace of the United States is the actual term. And that's in the federal jurisdiction. And so what the issue there is, nobody's really fully clarified as to where that fine line ends and begins. And that fine line actually intersects all sorts of issues in regards to property rights. 10th Amendment. You also have issues there with Article 6 with preemption. So you have all of that intersecting all at one point. And that right there, you can go into a lot of different areas just answering that. But the FAA claims airspace United States is what you have to have remote ID in. And that's the broadest. And one might ask them, by what authority do you claim that you can then regulate the airspace of the United States? And there's a constitutional argument, there's statutory arguments, there's a whole host of issues just in that one, as well as potentially even making those arguments. Potentially, how could the fallout happen?
The reason I brought it up is because there's this bill that some people in the FPV community are hanging their hat on. I don't remember the name of the sponsor of the bill, Mike Lee. It's the bill that proposes to give jurisdiction over the airspace to regional, to local community, city, state, whatever. And some people feel like that would be preferable to having the federal government regulate the whole airspace. Potentially, people think that they could even mean that you own the airspace above your property up to a certain height. Other people are saying that would be terrible. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah. So it is right now. We've kind of we have all our arguments, right? And we're kind of picking which ones do we want to pick. That one is under nuclear option, right? Because it is going to have widespread ramifications. That's definitely not just going to affect FPV. It's going to affect many different things. Additionally, we've kind of thrown it under the thing where we think, hey, a court probably is not going to stand up and make a ruling here.
You want to fight the fights you can win.
Right. Rather, they're more likely, if we brought up that argument and we start getting traction, what's most likely to happen is they'll send it back to the FAA on a separate issue. And then it's up to the FAA. Do they want to say, nope, we're not going to make any changes, let's fight on this? Or do they say, okay, FPV people, fine, you got up to 100 feet. And then we step out and we're like, got it, done. Right. So if we have to get that far, I think we'll make an evaluation at that point. But that is, I would, without tipping our hand, and we can edit out whatever John wants to here. But I would say that is not going to be our first argument out the gate.
Let me ask you this. I understand that. So right now you have you basically started the ball rolling on the case, but you haven't actually made any legal arguments. And you don't want to reveal yet until it's time to actually say it in court, what your legal arguments will be. Can you speak to what the goal is? If you got everything you wanted, what would you get? What would it look like for RC enthusiasts?
Yeah, sure. So the goal here is that we can continue flying as we have been, meaning RC enthusiasts and FPV and model aviation, all of us. We can continue as we have been flying for the last 100 plus years in a safe manner that does not contain any kind of regulation that says, hey, you guys have been operating safely. Thanks for your work over the last century. But hey, now go ahead and broadcast everything that you're doing.
So complete rollback? A complete rollback? Is that what you're saying?
I would say that when my interpretation is that when Congress said, hey, we need to integrate UAS into the airspace, that was not meaning that we need to track little Johnny's air hog that he flies in his backyard with his dad and make sure that he casts. I think that we can achieve both things here, and that the FAA is just overstepping, and that we could both achieve safety, what Congress mandated, what multiple other agencies want, all while allowing us for us to continue flying safely and unregulated as we have been for the last 100 plus years. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great way to put it. I mean, a lot of people may not. Sometimes people say, "Who gave the FAA authority to do this?" And it turns out that it was an act of Congress, the FAA Reauthorization Act of whatever the year was. I'm sure you know, Jonathan. But they didn't say you must implement remote ID. They said, as you put it, Tyler, they want to integrate RC flight into the national airspace. And the FAA said, yeah, we got it, boss. And just took that as sort of carte blanche to do all of these things that some would argue certain interests, commercial interests and security interests wanted to do anyway. But as you guys are saying, some would argue that that's an overreach and it was not what Congress mandated. It was more than Congress mandated, and that there's room for something else. I guess that's your take on it.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think that's a good way to sum up. We when I say we, I feel like I speak for a lot of people here where I say we want to continue flying as we have been in a safe manner that statistically and factually is safe. And therefore, we don't need to be regulated in any way, shape, or form. Of course, that's our argument going in here. Realize now, guys, that this is not necessarily just about trying to get away for us not to throw beacons on our drone. This is about, imagine we're fighting remote ID.
Tyler, I gotta ask you a question. I've seen some of the comments from other people on Facebook, and I feel like I wouldn't be doing my job as an interviewer if I didn't ask. One of the ways that you're funding this is through a GoFundMe. People, by the way, can contribute to because Jonathan, you're a professional and you got a team of lawyers there, and you're not doing that stuff for free, and you shouldn't. But that GoFundMe is raised, I think it's up to about $40,000. there are some people who are wondering, what's Tyler doing with that? Is that, is there a whole bunch of pile of money you're just sitting on? And if it doesn't all get spent, where is the sort of accountability to the people who donated? And I don't know if you want to speak to any of those questions.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So this case is filed in the United States District of Appeals, right? Jonathan, I say that right?
The DC Circuit Court of Appeals.
Thank you. If you had to pick out a place in the United States that was probably the hardest, most complicated, and most expensive to go ahead and file a lawsuit, this is probably it. So every cent that we've collected so far has been spent. It was spent before we went ahead and filed it, and we've thrown in a lot of RaceDayQuads, savings account funds into that. Nonetheless, every donation is fully in point, and it helps us field things that we otherwise would not be able to. When I first reached out to this was before the GoFundMe and everything, and I would have been surprised if you said, "Hey, a year from now you're going to have 3 lawyers, 2 of which being the very best which money can hire in their field, working on this case." So, and a lot of that, most of that is due in part to the GoFundMe and the support that people have shown. So, if you can donate, it's extremely appreciated, and it does make a difference. It truly, truly does. So thank you. And if you can't donate, that's okay. We still, so a like, a share, a comment, just to show support, or notifying others of the case or of the cause and why it's important to you is helpful as well.
Because you originally said we're going to sue the FAA. You just came right out and said it, and then later you started the GoFundMe, and some people said, "Oh, I see." But I think that what I'm hearing from you is that the original message is that regardless of what happens, I mean, if people want to support you through the GoFundMe or support you by shopping at RaceDayQuads, that's welcome. At the same time, you're committed to seeing this through one way or another, and that already has involved kicking in your own money and will involve kicking in more probably.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like I said from the very onset, the very first message I put out there, this is something that I feel is important, and I feel it's worth it to pursue, and therefore we are going to do it, and we are doing it.
Awesome.
But so many people reached out. I mean, we can flash back to March of last year, and I've never seen anything like that in the FPV community before, where everyone is so united in a way behind figuring out, hey, how this seems like a promising way to go about things. How can we help? And so it was because of all of those requests where I reluctantly, because when we first made the GoFundMe, we hadn't done anything yet. We hadn't spent any money yet. I mean, I had a few phone calls with John, and we had at least determined that, hey, there is a case here for sure. But we hadn't done anything, and so I was like, oh, okay, well, so many people are requesting it that it would probably be a bad idea not to go ahead and do it. And I'm glad that I did, because now here we are a year later, which originally that would have been my plan, is to, hey, we filed the case, sweet, make the GoFundMe. But the effects of the $43,457, which have been donated so far in GoFundMe, can already be seen, and are probably a huge reason why, despite such a drastic change from the NPRM to the final rule, we're still able to continue on with the case because we've done so much research over the last 12 months.
Right. Jonathan, what is the next step for the case? What's the next step, and when might it happen?
Yeah, great question. So we have some more paperwork that we need to file on 15th of April, and then also procedural motions, anything that needs to be just filed there by the 30th of April. I don't really suspect too much is going to be happening there. Then the court is going to give us a date on which we have to actually submit our briefs by. So that's, if you will, when we're going to actually play our cards, and you can see which aces we throw down. And right, I mean, really, what it was is, I mean, a lot of this research, you guys are probably wondering, like, you guys are spending all this time and money. What did you actually do? And unfortunately, we kind of got like, well, we did a lot of work, but we can't show you because it's secret, right? But I mean, we went through and tried to identify every possible legal argument that was out there. And then we actually scored them and ranked them and went through the case law. And there's different standards of review relative to different circuits and stuff. So we actually went through a very extremely exhaustive amount of research to figure out, no, we picked the best court, the best arguments. And it's Death Star Trench Run. Many Bonthans paid and gave money to GoFundMe, and they paid the price to get us that Death Star plan. So that's really kind of where we're at right now. And then as we play our hand, then everybody can kind of start seeing more of what actually went into it. Because we also thought out not only, what happens if we do play certain arguments, what's the next couple chess moves,
Right.
Because this is going to happen. This is going to play out most likely over the next couple of years, because I doubt the FAA is going to go away on this. Right. And so we're kind of
they're
like,
not going to just roll over.
I mean, yeah, you're like, what? They're gonna come back, and then we're gonna have to fight. And it's just gonna go on and on for the next couple of years. So that's also gone into the whole strategy as well, as to like, yeah, where are we gonna be 3 years from now, and what are the arguments? The nuclear option, as Tyler was talking about, all the different things that can go into those, how we structure things going forward. And so we have a fairly good chunk of arguments we've identified, and I've sent them over to Tyler and the attorneys and I. We've discussed them, and we've had other volunteers of attorneys that have also looked them over as well, and looked at the arguments, and we've had discussions on just out of the ones that we've seen, which ones are the most shocking, if you will, which are the ones that grab your attention the most. So people were kind enough to donate their time to look over things. So we've put in a really good faith effort, and that's also why, if you're interested in like, how much effort we've really put in, look at all the information that Tyler has obtained so far with under the Freedom of Information Act, all those documents. If you go to the GoFundMe page, right, on all those documents there, and also on the RaceDayQuads website, there's a number of documents that nobody else on the internet has. It's because of the level of digging. We ripped everything apart we could to identify the all the cohort, the 8 MOUs with the cohort, the UPP Phase 2 MOU. We actually are still waiting to get back some more information from them regarding all the remote ID testing they did with the FAA. There was a bunch of stuff the FAA gave them, and that was all post cohort. We have the con-use document. Nobody has that. We were the ones that found that. So if you can say like, wow, look at how much John and Tyler and the guys have ripped apart, finding all that. And we also had some people that were very, very, a lot of people assisted in telling us where the Death Star plans are, and where's the exhaust port and the Death Star. And that's how so just look at that, and you can kind of get an idea of how much effort we've put into actually trying to take it out.
Well, Tyler, I don't want to put you on the spot, but some people have asked, why aren't other companies doing more? Why does it seem like so many people who are influential in FPV are just willing to let this slide? And I'm not asking you to call out names or read anybody's mind, but I do wonder if you have any thoughts about, you're the only one who's actually taken legal action here.
Yeah, sorry, you cut out for most of that question, but I think I got the gist here. So look, I will acknowledge that a big reason why at least none of the other retailers have stepped in is because how I initially went about announcing this. I was so gung-ho that I failed to reach out to any of them before actually announcing it. Therefore, it created this perception of, oh, it's a Tyler Brennan RaceDayQuads thing. Therefore, it's hard for Get FPV, Pyro, Heli Nation, RMRC, whoever, to go ahead and tag their name on there, because it just looks, it is just not as good of a look as possible for them, right? So I readily acknowledge that if I had thought about that more ahead of time, we might have some other big retailers in on this. However, I would remiss if I didn't mention that we have had a lot of manufacturers and other entities step up and sponsor this in a way that they are able to. all of those are listed on the GoFundMe and on our homepage if you want to see who is pitched in here. But most of the manufacturers have, and that's super awesome, and we do appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate your candor on that answer. It sounds like it may be a case of if you've got somebody who is, doing a great job carrying the ball, the best thing you can do is get behind him and not get in his way. And maybe people feel like you're doing a good job there.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And there's also, I mean, most other retailers have stepped up in some kind of way and urged their customers to support whatever they feel is the best way to go about this. A lot of them have chosen to back the FPV Freedom Coalition, which we also think is a super awesome initiative, and they've done a lot of good work for us in FPV. So, I definitely, I don't think, if you asked me a year ago, I would have said, okay, yeah, it's probably like just already you, I guess. But no, I think that all FPV, the companies and we've done a really good job at all the companies have at urging their customers to step up. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I look forward to hearing more about what's going on as the case proceeds. Maybe even someday we'll see RaceDayQuads versus the FAA in front of the Supreme Court. Well, Jonathan, you feel like you could argue in front of the Supreme Court? Fair enough.
I guess if that's what it takes, let's go for it. I mean, like, oh, Death Star trench run. Oh, with your left hand this time. Like, oh, what? 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 You didn't say that. I was throwing my right. What are you doing, man? Like,
Let me throw you guys one more thing. Every time somebody does an interview, they do it because they're promoting something or they have a message they want to get out there. Let me let you guys close up with, what is the message that you want to get out there by doing this interview in case we didn't cover it already? Jonathan, you want to go first?
Yeah, I would just say that check out those documents that we have obtained from the FOIA under FOIA.
Linked down below.
And everybody can get a really good sense of kind of just how much effort we really put into it, and actually the fruits of our labor. And all of that information went into how we should structure our arguments, or maybe not how we should, right? Because it's like Battleship, right? Sometimes those misses also tell you, don't shoot over there again. Go more on the other side, right? We're looking for that little submarine in the corner somewhere. We know they're hiding it, right? Or that little, I'm talking about, little boat, that little PT boat. Oh my gosh, I hated that thing, right? So, but we've been looking for the PT boat because we had the Fourth Amendment aircraft carrier. Yeah, we all know that's there, but we're looking for the other one. So I would just say, look at those documents that we obtained under FOIA.
Okay, Tyler, anything else to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just it's very rare that you'll see a plaintiff in a lawsuit get on YouTube with their lawyer and talk about it, right?
That's true.
The reason for that is that I don't feel like it is a Tyler Brennan or a RaceDayQuads thing. I feel like this is truly an FPV community, an RC community, a model aviation community versus the FAA. And so that's why we're trying to be transparent. And if anyone ever has any questions, they're more than welcome to reach out to me personally through our RaceDayQuads Facebook group, and I will get back to them.
You are for an active duty Air Force fighter pilot and the owner of a gigantic FPV company. You are super active on the Facebook group, so definitely feel like you're not kidding around there. All the stuff that we talked about, there's links in the video description to the relevant pages, including the GoFundMe if you want to contribute. And thank you guys so much for coming out. Good luck with the case, obviously. Okay.
Thank you.
We're done.
Thanks, Joshua.
You guys, I don't know where I am, and I don't know what's going to happen, but if I don't make it out of this, I just want to know that you subscribe to my channel. Or maybe join my Patreon, or click one of these videos I picked out for you.